welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. I'll be your astrologer today. Happy Thursday. I hope your guys' week is going well. I am back at it with yet another video, and today we are talking all about Jupiter in Gemini square the nodes of the moon. If you guys like my content and you want to see more of it, click the bell button below. Be alerted as to when I have new videos up on the channel. Subscribe to the channel and give me a thumbs up if you like this video. Comment down below where this Jupiter square is taking place in your chart and where you're feeling the growing pains. I'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for liking, commenting, sharing. We've seen a lot of growth in the channel recently, so let's keep this thing growing. I'm excited to be back. I have been looking at this square and I was like, you know what? This is going to be the perfect day on May 15th with some of the lunar transits to talk to you guys about this square. This is where you're going to see astrology in action. So if we take a look at the real-time clock, if you guys are watching on the 15th, the moon is in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. We see the moon square the north node, square the south node, oppose Jupiter, and it's really going to enhance these feelings of this transit. But truth be told, some of you guys have already been feeling it. You've probably been feeling it for the better part of the last couple of days or so. Jupiter in Gemini is in its last final moments between now and June of moving through the mutable sign Gemini, and it's pressing down on the north and the south node. So today I'm going to talk to you about what this means, how it feels, maybe a little bit more from like an evolutionary perspective of this transit. And of course, I'm going to be giving you guys all the tips, the tricks, and the predictions for the 12 rising signs. So if you stay tuned till the end, we'll talk about that. I also did a little bit of like some research into the last time that we saw this transit taking place, particularly in these signs. And I found some interesting stuff. So we'll also talk about that as well. Don't forget to follow me on X at BTB Astro. You guys can follow me there. You can see me pretty active. And if you want to see more about myself or my work, if you want to book a personal reading with me, maybe pick up an astrology calendar or anything like that, click the links below, head over to my website at beyondtheveiltarot.com. I also teach astrology, so check out my courses while you're there and sign up for my newsletter. All right, so we're talking about Jupiter square the nodes. Obviously, you guys should know by now after having Jupiter in Gemini for the last year, it's been a bit of a doozy. It's been like information overload, especially having Jupiter in this sign. It's technically in its fall. So that's going to play a little bit more of a role in this, I think, where some things feel like larger than life, or like I keep saying, it's like a mental, like kind of like tornado. And Jupiter is squaring the north node in Pisces, which is ruled by Jupiter, and the south node in Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury. And as many of you guys know, squares represent pressure, so it's kind of like a Mars aspect, where we're kind of feeling the pressure to grow, to evolve, get curious, and ask questions. Very much baked into the new moon in Gemini, if you guys caught that video on Tuesday. But this aspect is really going to be in play from today, May the 15th, all the way until the end of the month. We got to get Jupiter kind of closer to Cancer and out of the squares, obviously, with the north and the south nodes. So the next 2 weeks, you guys are going to be feeling that squeeze. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, evolutionary astrology is going to study, aspects relating to the nodes, aspects relating to Pluto, and it's really about the soul's kind of path to kind of figuring life out, why we're here, how we can grow, how we can learn, and kind of overcome some of our astrological challenges in the natal chart. But we can apply some of this to looking at the transits as well. So from an evolutionary perspective, really anytime Jupiter has been within about 10 degrees, we're feeling the square. But I wanted to wait until mid-May to do this because I feel like it was going to be a little bit more prominent. It was going to be a little bit more obvious as we're coming into Gemini season. And this is a pivotal aspect that's really kind of challenging the soul to grow by resolving karmic tensions. South node, the past, where we've been, self-undoing tendencies or patterns, but also where we can kind of remember where we've been. North node, more kind of dharma, what we're evolving into, what we're growing into, and what we're learning. So with Jupiter kind of smack dab between the future and the past, we're being asked to grow in the Gemini area of our chart. Now that North node is going to represent the soul's evolutionary path, okay? So being in the sign of Pisces, this is more about spiritual surrender, compassion, and using our intuition. While the South Node, which is in Virgo, is much more about past life patterns, especially relating to health habits, being a perfectionist, or just overly analyzing things and being overly critical. So with Jupiter coming into this focal point of the square, it basically means that we're bringing in the planet of expansion, Jupiter, but also wisdom, growth, and abundance. And it's amplifying the tension that's kind of going on between the North and the South Node. The square indicates, especially here, that it is going to be having us focus on integrating intellectual curiosity, Jupiter and Gemini, with some kind of soulful purpose, especially because it's the ruler of the North Node as well as Saturn. Interesting aspects, I mean, especially with Jupiter being in his fall, if you guys follow like traditional planetary rules, Jupiter is associated with Sagittarius and it's got that connection with Pisces. So when it's in Gemini, you're going to see that the planet has a harder time kind of tuning into some of Jupiter's themes and lessons. So one of the issues that we kind of see here is with Jupiter being in this placement, it's operating in kind of like a weakened state, right? And Jupiter thrives in Sagittarius or Pisces, where it can kind of express its boundless optimism a little bit more easily. It's more faith-based. It's also able to see the bigger picture. But when it's in Gemini, where it's a little bit smaller, it's going to have a more difficult time because its energy is going to feel more scattered. And obviously, we have less of a focus on details. And we can also see that there is some kind of mental restlessness. So one of the themes that I see with Jupiter in this sign is like scattered energy, right? I don't know if you guys have been feeling it. I've definitely felt it this year, especially with some of the squares to Saturn and Pisces, which we saw in the summer of 2024 and also right at the end of the year. But Jupiter and Gemini can really lead to like overextension. So we're taking on too many ideas. We're taking on too many projects. There's too many conversations that are going on, sometimes without depth or follow through. There can also be this tendency to kind of take risks that are not necessary. The pursuit of knowledge obviously may prioritize, anything over depth, and this could lead to like shallow beliefs or shallow interactions, maybe chasing trends rather than seeking a higher truth, which is something that Jupiter really wants. We can also see that there's like amplified communication challenges with this square because Jupiter is naturally very optimistic, and when it's in Gemini, because this is the sign that deals with duality, we can find that there could be exaggeration. We can also see misinformation and difficulty discerning truth from noise. Now, the positive that I like about this transit, though, is that there's definitely growth through humility. Jupiter in its fall, it learns to kind of temper more like the grandeur that can kind of come with Gemini's kind of personality traits. We can also see that we can be more adaptable, and also find wisdom in small practical insights rather than grand philosophies. So listening to podcasts, reading books, maybe this is about like following certain people in media and getting like lots of good insight and information, which could be very practical and matter of fact, not super kind of heady and kind of over the top that we see with Sagittarius. Now, I think the evolutionary lesson through the square in a nutshell is that really what we're looking at is Jupiter is urging the soul, right, to really channel Gemini's intellectual ability into Pisces' spiritual compassion because Jupiter rules the North Node. So this is also going to be about releasing Virgo's kind of tendencies to want to overanalyze, be overly critical, like I said, be a perfectionist. And this is going to, I think, being in the sign of Gemini, really add a layer of humility, requiring conscious effort to like avoid mental overload and focus on meaningful soul-aligned growth, right? Jupiter. Now we're going to look at the Sabian symbol of where the square is going to be taking place. And if you guys are watching now on the 15th, you're already feeling it, but it looks like the square is going to come in right around 25 degrees and change. So it looks like this is going to be happening on May 18th. In just a few short days, this will be the exact square. So 25 degrees is an Aries degree. This is an action degree, personal degree. It can be about our identity. It can also be about the first steps that we take and what actions we are initiating. So watch for that happening. So funny, happening also right around the Sun Uranus day. Wow. So there's some other stuff that's kind of going on in the sky. Mercury square Mars is kind of been in the air as well. So let's read the Sabian symbol for 26 degrees of Gemini, which is, let's see, what is it? A frost-covered trees against winter skies. All right. So, where is this? There we go. Okay, so frost-colored or winter frost in the woods. The theme is a temporary setback. The symbol speaks to the significance of interruption, temporary loss or delay, or the upsetting of plans or things not flowing smoothly. Let's see. So it also speaks to the principle of priorities, or first things first, the need and power of the universe to sustain itself over the demands of men, that everything conform to their personal convenience. The image of winter frost in the wood alludes to the suspension of normal activities or a sudden freeze in the motion forward, and it emphasizes the need to change perspective. It also signals a moment of wonder and a time for appreciating the magic and splendor to be found in the fulfillment of cosmic purpose. At its highest, it represents transition and realignment, the process of transformation where the old gives way to the new. Watch for elimination or sweeping away of all that has no further use or value. The accent is on interruption. Things may be canceled or delayed through no fault of your own. The greatest advantage lies in finding meaning and opportunity in postponement or having to wait for what you want. Appreciate the unexpected. Guard against crystallization. Don't miss the magic moments that inevitably occur in the unexpected disruptions of plans and schedules. Stepping stones is transformation, wonderment, beauty, pause, temporary setback, interruption, delay, suspension, and freeze. Well, it's in the sign of Gemini, so I'm thinking transportation, air travel, local kind of transportation, buses and trains, communications, that kind of stuff. I'm thinking there could be something that's kind of going on there, especially with Mercury being the ruler. And you see Mercury, which has just come out of a square with Mars. So I'm thinking like financial transaction issues with like getting money on and off of exchanges, or like banking stuff. And when this square happens, Jupiter is going to be met with a trine from the moon, and it will have just come into conjunction with Pluto. So it's going to be like hours later that the moon's going to square Mercury. So we could see some power outages, issues with technology, issues with the internet, especially with Mercury communications, and then the opposition to Mars. My goodness. I haven't even looked at exactly what day this is going to be, but in terms of days of the week. But I think we're going to see something. We've seen a string of, especially with the Mars-Pluto oppositions, and we've also seen it recently with some of the Mercury-Pluto squares. Like, we're already starting to see some of the power outages. I know that we had it in parts of France and Spain. I know there's been other places recently over the last week that we've seen some outages, but I'm wondering, where does power outages or issues with power impact connection of the masses? Where is it going to be impacting commuter, transportation? Where is it going to be impacting financial exchanges? That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. And also like information blockages, and where we're not getting the necessary information about what's going on because we might see some power related issues. Anyway, I think really the meaning of the Sabian symbol, so we think about like frost covered trees, right? So it's invoking like a scene that is serene, quiet, it's contemplative, and obviously it has this ability to kind of go, okay, so there's snow. Is that going to create a delay or a challenge kind of getting around, at least those of you guys who get heavy snow with where you live? And I think about like that image of having a moment where it can be beautiful and still, right? Especially when you think about when the snow just falls and everything is like white and untouched and like perfect, before you see all like the critters and all like the people that are kind of messing up the snow. So it reminds me of finding beauty in the moment, especially if there is something that is delayed, or if there is a setback, or if there is like a weather-related event. And this is where, everything is on pause and it's able to kind of give us clarity. So it can reflect an inner need for reflection and finding value in that moment, especially like at a time where, everybody else is going to feel like a little bit frazzled with some of the transits that are going on. And it gives us an opportunity to take a step back and read a book, listen to a video, maybe have a conversation with, somebody while we're waiting for the train. And it also teaches us about being adaptable and being resilient, which I think that is another trait that we kind of see from some of the Jupiter squares to the nodes. Obviously, trees can endure winter, right? They symbolize resilience and they can endure any weather condition. So in Gemini, I think it's about mental adaptability, maintaining clarity and strength in the mix of what can feel like a very complex or mentally kind of overloaded couple day period. This is great for clarity, though. I think it's about illuminating things. The frost in the snow, it sparkles and it's able to kind of stand up to the winter sky. So it can show a difference in perception where ideas and communications can become clear and precise, even in a cold or kind of detached context. And snow is temporary, right? It eventually melts. So it can kind of hint that there is a fleeting moment. Just as the frost is temporary. And I think it aligns with Gemini's kind of ever-changing nature, urging you to seize moments of insight before they shift. So I'm curious to see what kind of happens that week, kind of like today through maybe the 19th with some of the squares where we're just being asked to kind of communicate and also think differently or grow in some aspect of our life. Now, I think that if we were to apply this specifically to Jupiter in Gemini, I think it's really about the intellectual energy of this transit over the next week or two, and really a need for clarity as well as focus, especially when we start to kind of feel like there is a lot of things that are moving around us. Obviously, we know that square manifests as tension between chasing fleeting ideas, right? That's very much Gemini's like frost, and seeking lasting spiritual truth, the North Node and Saturn in Pisces. So I think this symbol is really encouraging us to find beauty in disciplined, clear thinking rather than expecting perfectionism or being hypercritical or trying to kind of hone in on all the details with that South Node in Virgo. Now, if we think about the themes that are going to manifest from this particular square, just out in the world or in your own life, one is definitely going to be information overload, okay? Like we might find that we're having conversations where somebody is just telling us way more than we want to hear. We might feel that there is just all kinds of news, that are dropping, and it's very overwhelming to kind of understand and comprehend and take it all in. Obviously, Jupiter and Gemini, it's going to amplify media, right? Gemini, and communication. So newspapers, articles, newscasts, independent media, all of that stuff. We're going to see a huge boom in information that's kind of coming up. And I think that this really brings up the risk of scattering our focus and maybe even, spreading exaggerated or misinformation or, like misleading narratives. I do think that we're going to see that because Jupiter is in its fall. And the square to the nodes may actually probably spark some public debates about truth and ethics and the role of faith versus facts, because Jupiter is known for its kind of like spiritual nature. And Gemini is about like information and more like intellectual things. Now, we will see educational tension. That is a theme that was also kind of baked into the new moon in Gemini. So I think that through that tension, we're kind of trying to figure out solutions or coming up with new opportunities and new ways of learning and getting the point across. But I am definitely expecting some kind of efforts to reform education. I think you guys are going to hear a lot about that. It may clash with like rigid or detail-oriented systems, South Node and Virgo. And also because Jupiter and Saturn are still in kind of a square, it's separating in these signs, and it's going to be coming into one final square in June when Saturn is in Aries and Jupiter is in Cancer. So technically it's applying, but it's separating from these signs. That also tells me that there is a need to kind of grow and expand out of old systems and things that are rigid where we're not learning what we need to learn. And Saturn does deal with the past. It can also deal with history. It can deal with ancient civilization. It can also deal with where there are some blind spots and things that are kind of going on that people want more information about. So I anticipate this is going to lead to new programs that's really kind of struggling to find the balance between innovation and practicality. And as for like spirituality, because the mutable squares can definitely be about cultural division. It could also be tension that's going on in regards to differences when it comes to religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs and international relationships. That's like another theme. So we may actually see that with the Pisces North Node, it's inspiring collective compassion, especially, in the realm of art, cinema, film, music, or humanitarian efforts. But Jupiter's kind of scattered energy with the square, it might dilute the impact unless it's super focused. So a lot of this is going to be about people being like, okay, well, if there are humanitarian efforts going on, let's get information about where, some of those resources are going, or let's, have rules and regulations revolving around how, resources are going to be dispersed. Laws and rules are very much connected to Jupiter. So I think there's going to be more kind of discussions and talk about that, especially as it's coming up against the square to Saturn and the North Node in Pisces, where maybe there has been nonprofit organizations, maybe there has been international organizations, there's been stuff to help people from weather, from poverty, from mental health or drug-related matters. And we're wanting to get more information about just exactly where those funds are going. So you're going to hear a lot about things being uncovered and information being released about where funds have been going to some of these nonprofit organizations, and even government and federal organizations, because obviously that's what Saturn kind of deals with. Anyway, we're going to see that there can be some technological missteps. All right. So advances in communication and tech is very Gemini. And that may face ethical or practical setbacks due to Jupiter's overreach. So there could be overhyped AI tools, or like stocks or tech-related stocks. And we might also hear more about privacy-related scandals, especially right when the Jupiter square is happening. You see the moon coming into conjunction with Pluto. So I definitely feel like we might hear more about information that's being released that people were not aware was being exchanged because you're subscribing to apps or you're going to be on social media platforms. We might also hear that there's going to be like a big data breach of some kind that can be coming up that could be exposing sensitive information pertaining to finances. So that's something else that I'm kind of watching for. In terms of how it's going to impact us individually, well, first things first, the Jupiter square, the nodes, really just wants us to expand and it wants us to grow, right? And when we can do it too quickly, we could also maybe be feeling like we're too overwhelmed with making a decision. There can also be this sense of being like, I know I need to do this, but I don't know how. And it's possible you're feeling this today with the moon opposition. One thing I would say is watch for the mental restlessness. Okay, I think I underestimated the mental restlessness with Jupiter square Saturn in this last year. I had high expectations for things that I was going to be doing in my Gemini house, and Saturn was like, oh, hell no. And it's been really kind of teaching me like, no, you can't do all of the things. You have to really become clear about what you have time for and what you can and cannot do. And it's been kind of tapering some of what Jupiter has been trying to expand into. But all with good reason. I feel like this can be really overwhelming, where we have too many ideas, too many choices. Maybe we're feeling like it's kind of clashing with the North Node and Saturn in Pisces, call for stillness. And individuals might feel a little torn between overthinking and kind of just trusting their intuition. And we're trying to kind of find the middle ground in between the two. Now, another thing that I've learned with the Jupiter in Gemini transit has definitely been learning with purpose. So for me, it's been a lot of like, what do I want to study? What's interesting to me? Things that may not always connect and correlate to the work that I'm doing, but also going and seeking new teachers or going and seeking new philosophies. I think that keeping an open mind with Jupiter and Gemini has been kind of like my go-to phrase. And I feel like this is starting studies or writing or teaching projects that we want to either participate in, or things that we want to, produce, or things that we want to launch. But really needing to focus on depth rather than, just trying to kind of just scratch the surface. Because sometimes we can get kind of surfacey when we're dealing with Jupiter and Gemini. We can know a little bit about everything, but not enough about the things that matter. And making sure that what we're learning is really aligning with some of our spiritual purpose or our philosophies or religious beliefs, or some of our goals. Obviously, this has led to some communication challenges, and this has been real fun now that we have Mercury, the ruler of the South Node, as well as Jupiter. So when we see Mercury transits kick up in the skies, squares to Pluto, squares to Mars, which we've come out of the Mercury square Pluto, but 17th and the 18th, we see Mercury still in a square to Mars. There is tension connecting to Jupiter as well as the South Node, right? So there's some other stuff kind of going on here. Sun Uranus, if you guys caught those videos, I was like, hey, there is some wild stuff happening at the end of May, and I think it was all really kind of set in motion since the Scorpio full moon. So as we're kind of getting into, today into the next 2 weeks, we're going to see some wild stuff that's going to be kind of happening. That's going to be shifting our physical or financial kind of futures with some of the setups that's going on down here. Anyway, we've had some communication issues. I think that's pretty fair to say. And I feel like whether it's, exaggeration or miscommunications that have been arising, it's really required like humility and also the ability to, practice understanding and taking time to resolve conflicts and learning to talk things out, especially in like relationships or working relationships. It's been like a huge theme. And the positive is that I think that this can really lead to, even through the chaos, there can be some kind of spiritual growth that can come from this, right? Jupiter square the nodes is, in a nutshell, spiritual growth. And so, yes, there have been and probably will be this week some moments of confusion or intellectual crisis, but it's pushing us on an individual level towards meditation, towards art, towards service, fostering major soul breakthroughs, and honestly learning how to kind of communicate from a higher perspective. Like trying to take the high road is also like, I think, a huge theme with Jupiter square the nodes. I've heard it's funny, I follow a lot of podcasters. I follow a lot of people that are not necessarily in my like type of work. And I've heard a number of people say like, there's all these things that I feel like I've been working on or wanting to do, but I haven't been able to do it. Like I have felt stuck or stalled, or I've been really tired, or I've been, healing, or I've been just kind of like recuperating, and I've had to kind of put some of my plans on back burner, and it's given me time to really integrate and like reflect. And I've heard this from like a dozen different people that I follow. And I find it very fascinating that Jupiter is very much connected to like influencers or podcasters or writers or people who are active on media. And they're trying to look at it from like a more kind of, oh, what am I learning? Or even like a humorous kind of perspective from what has really kind of felt like Saturn, North Node, Pisces, some depressive, periods, or periods where they've had to kind of go dark for a couple days, or they haven't been able to get out of bed, or they've been really struggling with their emotional health or with addiction issues, or, getting out of their own way. So sometimes it's quite literal. And obviously when we see the nodes square Jupiter, we're all collectively kind of being asked, okay, are we focusing more on talking, or are we actually listening? Or are we taking time to really integrate and learn the lessons and wait until we feel like it's right to move forward? Or are we just kind of rushing through things and going through the motion? So we might feel ourselves kind of oscillating and going back and forth between these two things. I do think that, this is really shaping collective evolution by highlighting the tension between the North and the South node. And it's really between information and wisdom. So what you'll see happen over the next 2 weeks, I think, with this square is that there is going to, like I said, be media surges, misinformation surges. Watch for a flood of information that's going to be coming through the news and the media, or we're going to see some viral trends. But the square creates confusion about what's actually true. Like there's going to be a lot of hype and spin. And it's going to lead to like public calls for media accountability or ethical standards. So we might see some really crazy stories that are just like stranger than fiction. We may also see some stuff that people are like, there's no way that that's true. And then we come to find out actually it is. And we're just starting to kind of unpack and uncover some of it. Now, I've said this before and I'll say this again. Jupiter wants freedom, right? Because of its association with Sag, it wants to roam, and it also wants to find the higher or the bigger meaning of life. In the sign of Gemini, it's been about free speech. So throughout the last year, when we saw Jupiter and Saturn square fall of 2024 and also the end of 2024, that coincided with a lot of like people that were getting hit with, trying to exercise free speech all over the world. And I'm just staying neutral on this, but, obviously a lot of the Jupiter-Saturn squares have been things covering immigration and people speaking out about their concerns about immigration. We've also seen like hate crimes, nasty words, things being said, people being incredibly unkind to others. And we've also seen lots of tension revolving around, religious philosophy and religious beliefs, and, how that's also kind of playing out in the world as some issues in terms of our ability to be diplomatic with, other people who have different, belief systems. very much Saturn in Pisces. I think a lot of this is where, some people are holding on really strongly to their religious or their spiritual beliefs, and almost to an extreme when we see North Node conjunct Saturn versus the square to Jupiter, where you're seeing some people who are flippant, or they're going back and forth, or they're trying to kind of poke fun or make fun of things, or they're saying things that are completely outrageous, and it can be very insulting to certain cultures and certain belief systems. So we see extremes basically with some of these squares. There's been technological overreach. There's definitely been, I think, a lot of impractical and overhyped projects and AI and, technology stocks. I think that there has also been, major debates about ethics relating to this stuff, and also free speech. I mean, that's all tied into it. So you see like how some of these tech stocks and how some of these AI softwares are developing, and people are starting to kind of question, like, is that going to be something that's going to be impacting the information that we're getting? If we're getting information, where is it coming from? How is that impacting, what we're learning? And then the things that people are kind of writing about and saying on social media. And also, how are some of these softwares being utilized to scan through things that people are posting or saying and like impacting visibility? So it's all kind of tied together, but I have seen a lot of like the Saturn-Jupiter squares manifest as like people getting arrested for, sharing concern about their communities, or, people also blowing up on social media for saying some really horrible, hateful, racist things. And I think you're going to see bits and pieces of some of this stuff kind of come up over like the next like week or two, unfortunately. Now, what does this lead to? Ultimately, Jupiter being ruled by the North Node is it saying we have to have conversations, and sometimes somebody does have to kind of say some terrible things to make themselves look like an asshat, so we're able to kind of look at things and go like, actually, we shouldn't be saying this stuff, or this is not really kind, or we shouldn't, be, pushing or giving attention to some of these particular topics, because it's actually going to create more problems in the long run. So I think there's going to be a cultural shift towards empathy. And I think that we're going to see more artistic and spiritual movements, Pisces, gain traction. But also, Jupiter being in its fall, it's going to make it hard to sustain the momentum. So we're going to find that it's requiring focused leadership to create a lasting impact if we're really going to have some of these shifts towards empathy and understanding, and also being able to be kinder to other people, even if they don't share the same beliefs or values that we might have. You're going to hear a rolling back, I think, also of some countries in regards to immigration, because North Node's conjunct Saturn, that's going to strengthen borders. We're also going to see Jupiter, which is a flippant sign, square Saturn, which means now it's recognizing and realizing what's been going on with some countries where there has been this kind of open border policy. Actually, it's not working. And we're starting to lose, like the media war on this. And now the tide is turning. And this is not my political view. This is the astrology. Saturn and Neptune are going to go into Aries. You're going to see people who are going to suddenly be, I don't give a crap, in your face, direct, bold. This is the line. Do not cross it. And also very militant. And then you're going to see Jupiter go into Cancer, which is going to be expanding, focus on people's homelands. So yeah, Saturn and Neptune, you're going to have some people in Aries that are going to be, they're not going to like it. They're going to be very passionate. They're going to be almost like little spiritual warriors for, some of the changes that are going on, where they're feeling like individuals are being victimized. And then you're going to have other people with Jupiter and Cancer squaring this that are going to go, I don't care. People need to fend for themselves, or they need to figure out, their own lives, or they need to go to their own countries. And like, we're focused on our stuff. And you're going to see through the square coming up in June that it's like almost polar opposite of what we have had. And it's going to be like whiplash for some people. And so I think that the media might start to kind of go wild with some of this stuff as you're starting to see this set up. But I think that we're going to realize that perhaps maybe for the better part of the last year, right, of having Jupiter and Gemini, now we're going to see like the crazy of the craziest with the square. And then it's a completely different ballgame as we get into like June, July, and August, with Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn and Neptune in Aries, and eventually Uranus is coming into Gemini. So there's going to be like a big ripple effect where you're going to see a lot more independent media and a lot of people who are going to be like I said, man on the street style type of news, because so many people are going to go, oh my God, what I've been listening to and believing, or what I've been told, or what I've been kind of consuming media-wise has been so, completely polar opposite or off center from what I've been told. People are going to start seeking new news and media. So you're going to see a bunch of stuff pop up. For the individual, how this is going to impact you guys, obviously, if you have anything, that's going to be, I would say, about 20 to 29 degrees of the mutable signs. It's a little bit wider because of the square involving Jupiter. Jupiter is going to impact more, any of the mutable signs. So if you've got anything 20 to 29 degrees of Gemini, of Virgo, of Sag, of Pisces, you're going to be feeling this, especially those Sag and Sag risings, because you're going to have a grand mutable cross. So it's going to be very similar to what you're feeling right now with the moon going through Sagittarius. What this means is that some of you guys are going to feel like you have mental overload. Okay, some of you, not everybody. And it's going to feel like there is some indecision or chasing too many ideas that's kind of coming up for you. And you're going to feel like it's clashing with the need for peace or serenity or calm, right? Think about the Sabian symbol. And the challenge here is really to prioritize meaningful pursuits, or if you're feeling like it's just too much at one time, taking a step back, waiting till we get all the facts and the information and the figures before we make a decision and proceed forward. I think that I would look for the opportunities to grow through study or communication, right? So where there could be conflict, there could be opportunity to communicate and see a different perspective. Where there's something that's uncomfortable, that's really asking us to kind of grow and evolve and get out of our comfort zone. Success is really going to require us focusing on depth and avoiding exaggeration or anything that's superficial right now. I think that's like the biggest concern with the Jupiter square. And obviously when you see squares to the nodes, especially if it's involving one of the rulers, this is karmic release. It's a karmic release point. So we might see that, Virgo's kind of perfectionist tendencies are resurfacing, and it's requiring us on an individual level to let go of control and embrace the Pisces mess, or, trust in the unknown. It's just like, I don't know, but I just have this faith and I got to listen to my gut. It is telling me what I got to do or where I got to go or what questions I have to ask. And I'm not saying have blind faith, right? I'm not saying that. But Jupiter is a very faith-based planet, and that connection to Gemini can be how we're thinking, how we're talking to ourselves, what we're listening to, what we're consuming will influence the direction of where we're going. You want things that are going to be inspirational. You want to be listening to stuff that's going to be lifting you up. You want to be learning. You also want to be asking questions. By doing so, it's going to kind of help us work through this karmic release, and I think listen and learn to kind of trust our intuition a little bit more without feeling like we're just doing like a blind trustful. Now, for some people, this might feel like a spiritual awakening. I think Pluto, coming into Aquarius is an awakening for the masses. I think Saturn and Neptune is the awakening for individuals. And the more that individuals wake up, the more that they can connect and start working together with the collective. But Jupiter square the nodes can feel like a bit of a spiritual crisis. I've definitely had that transit, and it felt like that for me. I don't know if it feels like that for you, but it's triggering a crisis of faith, right? Or purpose even. Pushing us on an individual level to really look towards meditation or creative expression or acts of service. So there's so many things to kind of unpack with what's going on with like Mercury and other planets that I feel like there's a turning point that's coming where people are going to be privileged to some kind of information or something that's coming out that's going to help them make better decisions, become more informed, but they're also going to go, wait, I didn't think it was like this. I thought it was like that. Like, what do I do? So I took a look at past looks, and the last time we had this square, I believe, was in 2007, and it was when Jupiter was in Sagittarius, and the nodes were in Virgo and Pisces. I just want to double check that. And I was looking at it, but it wasn't like the same. It wasn't the same as it is now. So where was that? 2007. Here we go. So in 2007, the North Node was in Pisces, like it is now. Okay, but the Jupiter transit was in Sag. So, that was right on the heels of coming into some of the financial, I guess it was the precursor for some of the 2008, housing market stuff that we were having. There's a lot of other things going on. I don't want to get into it because it really doesn't correlate. But this was the last time I saw the square that was similar. But I actually had to go back even further and then did some research, and I went all the way back to 1895. And this is the last time that we saw Jupiter in Gemini coming into a square with the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo. So this was the last time. Okay, so it wasn't in our lifetime. So I was like, okay, I got to go and do some research. I got to see what was kind of happening in the late 1800s and what manifested from this particular square. Granted, Saturn, Uranus, all these other planets were in different places, but I knew there was going to be some similar stuff. And I could remember that there was like this overbuild out and stuff going on of like the railroads. We saw some kind of like financial busts that were happening as a result of that, of trying to grow and expand too quickly. But I found some other stuff too. So in 1895, we saw a Charleston earthquake, which happened around Halloween that year. But this was a major earthquake that was near Charleston, Missouri, and it was right along the New Madrid seismic zone. So it was kind of connected to the same zone that risks the, hitting the Midwest. It was not globally disruptive, but it definitely created some scientific interest in earthquake monitoring. Obviously, it had long-term implications for urban planning. So, through weather changes, disruptions, things that shift or grow, we find that there is information that can come from that can give us clarity for planning. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We also saw the same year X-rays were discovered, which I attribute more to Pluto because Pluto was conjunct Neptune in the same sign, but information connecting to X-rays, and technology and images was very Pluto-Neptune, but Jupiter was in that sign. So knowledge came from that. So we saw that X-rays were revolutionized, obviously, and brought into medicine and science. I think his name is Wilhelm Röntgen. He earned the first Nobel Peace Prize in physics in 1901 after this breakthrough had global implications for diagnostic and research. But growth in knowledge and information, and the North Node in Pisces does deal with like images and like photography. So that's kind of cool. We also saw that year the first motion picture screening, and this was in November of 1895. It was Max and Emil Skoglowski. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but they presented a short film in Berlin using their movie projector, a precursor for what would eventually be modern cinema. So their local, short film, right? Kind of Gemini, and the square to the North Node in Pisces, which would eventually turn into some major shift where within 100 years, we've got IMAX theaters, we've got movie theaters. Now people aren't going to theaters as much anymore, but still it ended up becoming like a whole, a whole shift for humanity when it comes to like art and culture. Obviously going to the movies is a big thing. So that was the Jupiter square of where something small started and it ended up influencing the masses in a very large way for what we watch or what we view. We also had the first chiropractic adjustment by Daniel David Palmer. He performed the first chiropractic adjustment in Iowa, founding new medical practice with global influence. I would think that would have more to do with like Saturn personally, because that's like bones, but still, we were able to learn something new about the body and like what could be going on with the pressure in our spines that we may not necessarily see. And there was major literary contributions that year. We saw the second Jungle Book. We also saw H.G. Wells release The Time Machine, shaping global literature majorly. Thomas Hardy's Jude, The Obscure, and Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest also debuted, and that reflected major cultural shifts that were kind of going on. So major growth that was going on with books and publishing that had a massive impact on the masses. Now, this was the big one for me, and this is where I kind of like squealed as I was reading this. I was like, there it is. We had an 1895 U.S. gold reserve crisis and J.P. Morgan's intervention. So the U.S. Treasury gold reserve was pretty much completely like depleted, right? Due to the lingering effects of the Panic of 1893, which was post all of the stuff that was going out with the industrialization, the build out of the railroads, all that stuff. And we saw a severe financial crisis that caused banking failures and the stock market declined. There was widespread unemployment. This was in 1895, so it was a few years earlier. But in 1895, JP Morgan and the Rothschild banking family loaned the U.S. government $65 million in gold to stabilize the reserve, averting a default on the national debt. The intervention underscored the reliance of private financiers in times of crisis and highlighted global financial interconnectedness as European banks played a key role. I think we're going to see some wild stuff. I think about that and I'm like, well, back then the U.S. became heavily indebted to JP Morgan and obviously the central banking cartels and the Rothschilds. And what manifested from that there forward was, just major tentacles into that, and then what eventually became like the Federal Reserve. So to give you guys context, something that we saw 2 years prior in 1893, the panic of 1893, we saw 158 national banks fail. Okay, in the 1800s, that's a lot. Mostly in the South and the West, and over 125 railroads entered receivership by 1894. The crisis was exacerbated by global events, including Baring Brothers' default in London of 1890 and economic downturns in Europe, which reduced silver prices and strained U.S. markets. Now, the recovery was slow. We had depression-like conditions that persisted until 1897. Okay, so the fallout was in 93. The bailout from the bad guys was in 85, and then we see all of this continue for another 2 years into 97. Now, we all hear, the Great Depression, all of this stuff, but prior to that, this was like the big, massive financial fallout. And you got to think about this. In order to save the banks, they needed to be loaned the gold. Well, we're no longer on a gold we're no longer on a gold standard, right? We just trust that it's gonna be there, it's gonna be safe, that we're gonna be covered, that the banks are gonna be covered. And the more that I was looking into the transits that are happening then and what's gonna be happening now, when I look at the transits, it's like wild, and it ties into Mercury and Taurus, the square to obviously Mars and Leo. People getting a little finicky about investments and money going in and money going out, and whether or not there's going to be stability in certain major financial institutions, right? Think of like big name banks. Anyway, we saw also during this time, this was cool, the first automobile patent was created, and this was in November of that year, and it was by George B. Selden. He received the first U.S. patent for an automobile. Well, Gemini is cars, right? So Jupiter there is like expanding our ability to have the freedom to roam, to drive, to go places, to expand also communities. So you had like cities, and then you had that connection to like outlying, cities and areas that might have been more rural. So this obviously went on to like totally transform the global economy in the 20th century. Cars became a huge thing, at least here in America. And like a lot of our factories and a lot of our jobs, was derivative from that. Now, that same year in November, we also saw the very first American automobile race. This was the Chicago Times-Herald race, and it was the first organized auto race in the United States, and it sparked interest in automobiles, foreshadowing their economic impact. Only 2 of 6 cars finished due to blizzard conditions, square to the nose, weather issues, and visibility issues. And obviously, this kind of highlighted early technological challenges. So just to kind of give you guys some insight on how it kind of manifested, like I said, I thought it was going to definitely be bringing up some major challenges, especially when it comes to transportation, especially when it comes to news pertaining to what the news is telling you about what's happening with, financial markets, or what's going on with stock markets, or what's going on with banking. Will we see history repeat itself? I don't know. But one thing I can tell you is how this is going to be impacting your rising sign. So let's take a look at the rising signs. I'll give you a little bit of info as to just kind of think about where you're being asked to kind of grow and evolve over the better part of the next 2 weeks, where maybe you're feeling those growing pains, and where you're having to also kind of tap into what's going on with the North Node in Pisces and maybe meditate, sleep, and think before you leap. As a reminder, I'm a Western astrologer. I do not practice Vedic. This is going to be my Western whole sign predictions. Listen for your rising sign. It's going to tell you exactly where the Jupiter square is taking place. Definitely take into consideration, the North Node and Saturn and what that's been teaching you. You can also think about how Jupiter is connected and correlated to Sagittarius and how that might be influencing some of the things that are happening as well. And if you happen to have a Gemini sun, moon, or rising around that 20 to 29 degrees, a lot of it's going to be on you, what changes you're making, how you're communicating, what you think, if you can approach some of these changes optimistically. Equally, if you happen to be ruled by Jupiter, so if you're a Sagittarius or a Pisces rising, you're really going to be feeling this as well. All right, so we're going to start with my Aries and my Aries risings. You guys are experiencing Jupiter and Gemini square the North and the South node. Now, the North node's in your 12th house, the South node's in your 6th house, and Jupiter is in the 3rd. So what this means is Jupiter is enhancing and emphasizing communication and learning. And it is squaring North Node and Saturn in Pisces, which is about the subconscious, and it's also squaring the South Node in Virgo, which is about work and health. So really for me, the themes are you overloading on information versus just seeking spiritual calm and peace? Are you balancing work routines with intuition? I would say as a tip for you guys, limit distractions on social media. Like seriously, it'll help. This will avoid Jupiter's kind of scattered energy. And I would meditate to connect with subconscious insights, maybe do some dream interpretation work, and simplify tasks rather than overanalyzing them. I'm predicting for you the positive thing that can kind of come of this is that you can have a new interest in writing. There could be a new learning project that might spark. And I think I would just kind of keep in mind that Jupiter here can lead to mental burnout. So spiritual practices will bring you clarity and it will reduce stress. So think like going for walks, meditation, doing some breath work, anything like that. Even journaling for like reflection can be really beneficial with this particular square. Yes, you may be feeling like you want to travel, you want to move, you want to get out, and you want to get about, but you can also be feeling a little exhausted, tired, or that it's just not quite the time yet to have a conversation or take a trip, okay? Good luck, Aries. Okay, we've got our Taurus and Taurus risings. You guys are going to experience Jupiter in Gemini in your 2nd house, square the North Node in Pisces in your 11th, and the South Node in Virgo in your 5th. So this is good problems to have, Taurus. I could see this as having, lots of financial stuff coming up, but I think it could actually be really positive for you. So obviously the 2nd house deals with finances. It's both physical things you own, cash in the bank, money in hand. It's also about physical possessions and values. While the North Node in Pisces in your 11th is about groups, friends, and your goals. And then the South Node in Virgo in your 5th house is about tapping into creativity, past life talent, as well as romantic partners and children. So I look at this and I go, well, it's about expanding income through ideas versus aligning with collective dreams. Maybe releasing the need to be perfect in what you create or how you create. Maybe it's about investing in yourself. Obviously, Jupiter has ties to your 8th house. So where you're investing in your talent, maybe you're taking some of your savings and you're investing, or you're doing something so that way you could bring something in that can bring you love. It can bring you opportunities for joy. I think that you have untapped potential in some of your talent. That's what I think looking at this, and that you may be surprised in what you're able to create, and you don't have to invest or spend a lot, to make something that's ultimately valuable. This can also be good money stuff that's happening for you as well, like expanding income through ideas, like writing. It could be information-based. It could be travel-based. You might be shifting the way that you look at your value system and what you need. And I would be focusing on financial goals, especially, for soulful causes, avoiding Jupiter's tendency to overcompromise. And I would say create imperfect art, like participate in hobbies where you don't have to be perfect. And obviously trust intuitive group connections and who you're kind of aligning with. But I predict, income opportunities will come through communication, teaching, writing, traveling. But just watch out for exaggeration. That could definitely be a bit misleading. And it's possible that a new social group can inspire you and help with your creative growth if you stay focused. Good luck. We've got Gemini and Gemini rising. Pressured to grow much. You've got Jupiter in your first house of self squaring the North Node in the 10th house of career and the South Node in Virgo in the house of home, family, and the past. So there's a lot of like, where do I put my focus? Is it on home and family or moving, or is it on, being out in the world and working? And you might feel a little restless with this transit, Gemini, although I do think it's good for you because it is really helping you really hone in on where Mercury is. Mercury in the 12th house conjunct Uranus and the sun is saying, if you don't know, take a step back, meditate on it, rest, pray about it, get a reading, like that kind of stuff. It's about not acting yet and waiting for when you get that download or when you get that like green light intuitively. So the first house is the self. So this is the self and the identity. That's where the square is taking place. And I think this is about redefining your identity through expansive ideas versus aligning, with your career title, right? It's like trying to do something that feels like it's your purpose. And whether that's how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to portray yourself, what you're doing for a living, this is about becoming honest with yourself and showing that version of yourself to the world. I think it's also about releasing home-related control or old ways of reacting to things emotionally. So I would say share your voice authentically. Watch for the scattered energy that can happen if you're taking on too many projects. Definitely, pursue what feels like soulful career goals. And I also think that this is about letting go of perfectionism in family dynamics, having to have the house perfect, having to make sure everything is organized, having to make sure that you're, at home taking care of things all the time. Like you might feel like, hey, I need some me time too, between what's expected of me at home and also what's going on at work. Like sometimes I just need to focus on the relationship with myself as, Jupiter is associated with relationships. It can also be a time that you meet somebody important, mentor, a therapist, a romantic partner, somebody that can come in that can kind of help you find the balance between your 10th and your 4th house as well. I predict for you that your presence will definitely draw attention with Jupiter square the nodes. Just be mindful that Jupiter can definitely cause indecision when it's in your sign. A spiritual career move can happen, or, a home healing can emerge, I think, and it can kind of make you more optimistic about navigating these two particular areas of your chart in the future. Good luck. We've got Cancer and Cancer rising. You guys are experiencing Jupiter in Gemini square the North Node in Pisces in your 9th and the South Node in Virgo in your 3rd. And Jupiter's hanging out in your 12th house, so it's not going to be as obvious. I call this like the guardian angel transit. So usually when you have transits involving Jupiter in the 12th house, it feels like some things are coming to a completion or coming to an end, but it's for good reason, right? So a lot of things are kind of happening behind the scenes, but it'll start to become more clear as we're getting into the summer when Jupiter heads into your sign. Now, it's happening in houses that deal with communication, learning, travel, belief systems. So in the 12th house, it's very subconscious, and it's also about spirituality. And even though Jupiter is in its fall, Jupiter likes being in the 12th house. So you might find that even though it's squaring the North Node, which deals with your beliefs, and the South Node, which is about communication, you're exploring inner wisdom versus just expanding your beliefs. You're like, you know what, let me go pick up a book on that. Let me do some research. Let me learn. Let me kind of marinate on it for a little bit before I make a decision about where I'm traveling, what I believe in, what I'm going to be studying, where I'm going to school. Like there is some shifts happening like behind the scenes when it comes to your belief system. So for you, I think that this is really expanding your beliefs, releasing critical self-talk, with the South Node in Virgo, and maybe being kinder to yourself and like trusting that the universe has your back. And you could be doing, some kind of divinatory process. So like tarot readings, astrology, things like that to kind of give you peace of mind with some of the things that are changing. But it could also be about integrating more of like a meditation practice, or maybe you're journaling to kind of, channel some of this wisdom. Maybe you're studying spiritual topics much more deeply. Practicing compassionate communication is definitely a huge theme. Just watch for exaggeration that can kind of come through. But I think it could just also be just a very active imagination, to be honest with you, with that square. And I do think that for you guys, this is, really about a spiritual breakthrough that's going to be coming through. And it can be a movie you watch, it can be a book you read, it can just be like an aha moment. And I would just say, watch for feeling overwhelmed with subconscious noise, like miscommunications will resolve if there have been, but you need to get some quiet time before you're able to kind of get clarity. So I would love to see you making time to just like read in silence, for a period of time, a day or a week. I'd love to see you guys going for walks by yourself to kind of clear your head. I would love to see you also integrating some mindfulness habits, because it can be really beneficial for your physical health, as Jupiter is tied to that as well. All right, so good luck. We've got Leo and Leo rising. You guys will be experiencing Jupiter's transit through Gemini in your 11th house, and it's squaring your South node in Virgo in the 2nd and the North node in Pisces in the 8th. So this is financial for you if you've got the North node in the 8th house and the South node in the 2nd house. Jupiter in the 11th is going to be highlighting your groups, your friends, your associations. It's going to also be really putting an emphasis on what are your goals? What is it that you're hoping to achieve? Are you telling people about your goals? Are you aligning yourself with networks and others who are going to help you grow and find the success that you're looking for? So as it squares the nodes in the 2nd and the 8th, it's going to be dealing with finances as well as transformation. So the themes that I'm kind of getting from this is definitely expanding social networks, versus just deepening intimacy. Maybe you're focusing on, having a variety of different social networks and people you can connect with. And maybe it's also going to be about letting go of rigid financial habits with the North Node and Saturn in the 8th. Also with Virgo, 2nd house, South node transit, maybe you're just really focusing on going and learning more about finances, and you're joining groups or you're getting information about saving, investing, like that kind of stuff can come up as well. And I think that this would be really good to be joining, soul aligned groups, but avoid overcommitting, because Jupiter is in its fall. Like, you want to be socializing and connecting, but you may have too many things on the agenda, or there might be, too many groups or people that you have to kind of meet with. Explore shared resources with trust. That's something else that kind of comes up with the square to the North Node in your 8th. And simplifying your budget without over planning. So, like if you go on, like, let's say like Facebook or like other groups where you're like, oh, budget saving hack group, or, how to travel on a budget, or, how to manage expenses. Like, you're going to see people who are just going to be giving information about how to do some of that stuff. And it can be actually really beneficial for you, and obviously kind of broaden your social horizons there as well. So I predict for you guys that you're going to see new collaborations. Yes, intimacy issues can surface if your energy is too scattered. Financial opportunities through networks can definitely grow with focus. And for some of you guys, there could be a wealth of information that could be coming from friends that could really impact your investment strategy or how you're looking at your spending habits. Good luck. We've got Virgo and Virgo rising. You guys are going to be experiencing Jupiter square the North and South node. Obviously, Jupiter is in your career zone. It's all about who you are out in the world, all eyes kind of being on you, and the things that you're learning about who you're becoming in a professional sense. Now, Jupiter is squaring the South node in your sign in the 1st house. It's also squaring the North node in Pisces in the 7th, and it's ruled by Jupiter as well. So Virgo, life gets a little loud, okay? Really for all the mutable signs, but life gets a little loud here, because I think Jupiter is really saying, in order to grow and expand in a professional sense, you have to be thinking about who you're partnering with, who you're aligning with. Is it time to change alliances professionally? Is it time to commit to a relationship? Is it time to get married? Does a relationship go public? Like, does something like that happen? Because you're going to be thinking about who's going to be supporting who you are out in the world. So the themes here are about expanding your professional influence versus just, kind of having a surface type of relationship dynamics. And that can be professionally or romantically. I also feel like this is going to be about releasing self-criticism when it comes to your relationship status or even your career. And I would say for you guys, this is about pursuing career opportunities in teaching, in media, in writing, in traveling, right? All of these kind of Gemini things. But know that you could be overwhelmed with all of the different things that you could or you should be doing. Now, to add another layer to this, Jupiter doesn't just rule relationships, it rules your home. So there could be a lot of like you going, well, do I need to look for a job in another area? Am I relocating for work? Did my job end? So now I have to relocate. These kinds of things can come up, and how that plays out in terms of your relationship dynamics with the square to the North Node in the seventh. I would say integrate mindfulness into, your relationships. Learning to kind of communicate as best as you can with relationships is going to be important, and maybe taking on a new role or a new responsibility in relationships or at work can definitely be a theme. Embrace your imperfections. Like the South Node square means that you have to kind of let go of self-criticism. But I do predict for many of you guys, you're going to see a career boost is very likely. But the relationship tension, can definitely arise with this change in career or status, and there could also be a sense of feeling like you're having to kind of give something up with squares to the South Node in your sign. So focus on self-acceptance. You'll find that there will be lots of growth going on in your career, and some relationships can weather the storm, especially if they really see your vision for where you see yourself kind of going professionally in the future. Good luck. We have got my Libras and Libra risings. You guys will be experiencing Jupiter and Gemini in your 9th house, square the South Node in Virgo in your 12th, and the North Node in Pisces in your 6th. If you happen to be a Libra rising, I would say 20 to 29 degrees, this will be trining you. So it's definitely a little bit easier to navigate if you have that trine, sun, moon, or rising placement. But Jupiter does well in the 9th house, right? Even though it's in its fall, it's kind of at home here with the traditional 9th house themes. The 9th house is obviously going to be about your beliefs, legal matters, publishing, travel, higher education, graduations, ceremonies, anything revolving around the bigger meaning of life. This is a house that deals with like good luck. And the square to the North Node in the 6th house is dealing with work and health and habits. And then the square to the South Node in your 12th house is really going to be about the subconscious. So when you put it all together, the themes here I think are really going to be about expanding horizons versus spiritualizing routines. It's like, don't just say you're going to do something, like actually go somewhere, have an experience, like be immersed in it rather than just reading about it or watching it. Releasing subconscious perfectionism is another theme. Jupiter's connected to your 3rd house, so it can mean that it is time for you to be planning trips, learning languages. It can be a really good time also to be starting legal processes or getting ready to write or publish a book or take a course. And I would say, if you're going to study, if you're going to travel, do it deeply. Don't do anything surface level with Jupiter being in Gemini. We want to avoid Jupiter's more kind of superficial nature in this sign. And you can do that by integrating mindfulness into your work and releasing any productivity guilt through self-compassion. Obviously, the North Node in the 6th house is about health and habits, but it's more spiritually like, are you taking time to rest? Are you also making sure you're doing work that feels meaningful and that it's purpose-driven? And if you are going to travel, you're wanting to make sure that you're doing your due diligence to suss places out before you travel there, learning the culture, learning the lay of the land, even some of the language. And this is really pushing and enhancing, hey, you got to go on a trip, or you got to meet a new teacher, or you got to take a course, or you got to study something, you got to write something, because there is something emerging when it comes to your belief system. And I think that whether it's a course or a trip, it's going to inspire you, and you're going to find that, yes, there can be some work stress or some scheduling stress that can kind of surface if you don't balance or schedule things accordingly. Subconscious healing can emerge if you really trust your intuition over Jupiter's noise. So I've seen a lot of Libra risings that have had huge shifts in their religious beliefs, actually. I've seen a lot of Libra risings that have been traveling, going to retreats, embracing new philosophies, embracing new religions or spiritual practices, and how that can actually really impact in a positive way their lifestyle, what they're eating, who they're surrounding themselves with, how they're going through their day-to-day, and becoming more mindful because those practices are kind of ringing true through some of your day-to-day routines. So You guys will have to let me know. Do you find yourself at an airport? As a fellow Libra rising, I'm like struggling going back and forth, being like, I know there are things that I have to do, but also being like, I just want to go on a trip. And I just got back from one. So I'm kind of fighting the travel bug. I think I know what it feels like to be a Sagittarius this month. Anyway, let me know what happens. We've got Scorpio rising. What's up, Scorpio? You're going to be doing Jupiter in Gemini in the 8th house, square the South Node in Virgo in the 11th, square the North Node in Pisces in the 5th. And it's in a sign that in conjunct or quincunxes you. So you might feel like these changes are just kind of coming out of like left field, out of nowhere. Jupiter in the 8th house. Well, this is a house that you are familiar with. Similar to Taurus, this is very financial for you, Scorpio. So Jupiter in the 8th house, it can definitely be obviously highlighting on the topics of transformation, right? Shared resources, intimacy. But it can bring you wealth. It can bring you investment opportunities. It can bring you inheritance. It can bring you support of some kind. What support? Well, it really kind of depends on what Jupiter rules. It rules your 5th house and your 2nd house. So if you're an investor, this is the time where you're making investments and there are things that are going to ultimately pay off if you're willing to take a chance or make an investment now. 8th house deals also with sex, intimacy. Jupiter's connection to the 5th house could be major turning points revolving around intimacy and relationships. Insurance matters. It can also be things connected to children and pregnancy and joint expenses. That can be another theme. Obviously, Jupiter ruling the 5th house for some Scorpio and Scorpio risings is about if you're going to go in, you go all in. Matters of the heart, finances, intimacy. It's just like you have to go all in. And you might feel like you are deepening intimacy through ideas, and that leads to some kind of soulful creativity. Maybe you're releasing old rigid social expectations where you're like, you know what, I don't have the same expectations of friends, or I don't feel like I have to show up and impress anybody anymore. I'm going to do what I need to do on my own time. This could also be bringing up for many of you guys that there's some psychological shifts revolving around changes with friends and some kind of shift happening when it comes to dating or relationships or children. So usually, the 8th house, it's like a well, it's very deep. So I think it's really appropriate that the Sabian symbol kind of has that connection where it talks about the depth that came through the new moon that you just had in Gemini in your 8th house, that it's wanting you to dig deep and learn how to communicate and express what you really want. What do you value? What's going to bring you joy? What's going to make you feel loved? What's going to make you feel like you can have, the ultimate kind of happiness and success? So in order to do that, you have to explore partnerships with focus. And I think this is also about, creating maybe art in an intuitive way or intuitive hobbies, maybe being flexible in group dynamics with the South Node in your 11th house. And I do predict that for many of you guys, there's going to be transformative connections that are going to form, especially over the next 2 weeks. You might find that there are some creative blocks that kind of rise from overthinking. And if you're in any group dynamic at work, or if there's a group project or anything like that going on, it can definitely take off. If you're working with other people, you just have to kind of stay grounded here. But Jupiter square the nose, that's like you might have some kind of cosmic blessing or gift that comes in that you did not see coming, to be honest with you. So you'll have to let me know what that is, Scorpio. We have got Jupiter in Gemini in your 7th house for Sagittarius and Sagittarius risings. Your chart ruler is in the 7th house of relationships. It's squaring the South Node in Virgo in the 10th. It's squaring the North Node in Pisces in the 4th. Woof. 20 to 29 degrees of Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, and rising. Life can feel a little loud, okay? But this is good things. These are good things that are happening, even though it may not seem like it. Your allies, your relationships, your astrologer, your therapist, your spouse, your significant other, your business partner, somebody is coming in and they're going to be like, we've got this. Like they're going to say to you, it's going to be fine. Like they're going to be hopelessly and gloriously enthusiastic about some of the changes that are coming up. And if you're single, you might actually meet somebody really prominent that comes into your life that's going to kind of help you navigate some of the heavier things that are going on at home. So what do I see for you guys? Well, Jupiter is bringing about some necessary expansion in relationships. Maybe you're communicating with people better. Maybe you're more optimistic. Maybe you're more open to committing, meeting people, dating, settling down, getting married. And I think the themes here with the square to the North Node in your 4th house and the South Node in your 10th house is that you're expanding relationships, right? Versus like just only being focused on, your home or your private life or your emotions. You're like, no, I have to focus on other people too, other people's feelings, like they matter as well. Or I want somebody to kind of join me in some of the things that I'm building or cultivating at home. Equally, you're releasing this feeling of having to be super hyper focused or perfectionist when it comes to work or your career. You might go, work's fine, it's kind of on autopilot. I'm shifting into being more focused on, who I can partner with or who I'm meeting or what new relationships are coming in, because you also want to cultivate that and more of your home life. So my tips for you would be to collaborate with partners, but make sure they're focused. Like Jupiter in the 7th house, like this could be like man buffet for some single Sag risings. You could just be over inundated with suddenly a bunch of new potential romantic partners, lots of clients. There could be lots of interests also in communicating with you or scheduling or meeting with you. You might be going back and forth between two therapists. You might be going back and forth between two potential outcomes with like a business partnership or a collaboration of some kind. So teamwork is the dream work here. I think that if you can collaborate with people who are focused and avoid maybe partners who have too many scattered promises, you can create a very soulful union and also a very beautiful home space. You might be prioritizing, career progress over perfection, which I think is a good thing. And I predict that for all Sag and Sag risings, you will see some kind of a partnership grow of some kind. But watch for the family tension with the square to the North Node in Saturn. And it may be, some emotional refocusing that kind of needs to take place. Career opportunities will emerge despite the discipline, despite Jupiter's fall. So clients will be there. There will be partnership opportunity. Work will continue to grow. I'm more looking at this like if you want to get out of how you've been living or where you've been living, you need help and support from another person. Or there could be some new growth or development in relationships, but family members, sometimes even roommates, or just even the past is kind of getting in the way of being able to be optimistic about this new beginning. So let people in, let people help you, right? Good luck. We've got Capricorn and Capricorn rising. You guys are going to experience Jupiter and Gemini in your natal 6th house. It will be squaring the North Node and Saturn in Pisces in your 3rd, as well as the South Node in Virgo in your 9th. Now, Jupiter represents your subconscious and what you need to heal, what's behind the scenes, okay? And it's also connected to communication. So it's now sitting in the 6th house, square the North and the South Node. This is pretty personal for you. Okay, I feel like you should receive some victim compensation because you've been dealing with Jupiter-Saturn squares since last summer, and Saturn is your chart ruler. So this has been impacting you. Now it's kind of starting to wane a little bit, but Jupiter going into the 6th house has really been about work. It's been about work. It's been about health. It's been about learning more about health, prioritizing, maybe juggling a couple odd jobs. And that square to Saturn in the North Node in Pisces in your 3rd has been friction and communication. And then the square to the South Node in Virgo in your 9th has been bringing up some kind of shifts revolving around travel, education, your belief system of some kind. So Jupiter in the 6th house is expanding routines. That's really what this is about. And I think that, you're trying to learn more about compassionate communication with the square and like how to be understanding and maybe patient with people at work, patient with pets. Maybe you're being more patient with, people when it comes to healthcare or treatment, that kind of stuff. And this is also about releasing rigid worldviews because it's also squaring the South Node. So taking your time to communicate, talk to people, also managing time and health, that can be a huge theme. I think really the tips for you guys is just like streamlining work and wellness, right? Because Jupiter in the 6th, it wants to be productive and it wants to get things done and it wants to do it in an efficient manner. But we want to avoid Jupiter's overextension because there could be too many odd jobs or too many things that you're doing and it can like overwhelm you, especially mentally with some of the squares to Pisces. I think this is about practicing intuitive communication because of Jupiter's connection to the North Node in the 3rd. A divination technique, meditation, breath work, anything like that can give you some kind of clarity so that way you can make decisions about what you do in the day-to-day and you don't feel kind of like overwhelmed. I also feel like this is about like studying, topics that are soulful, spiritual related topics, wellness. It can also be about self-healing. These might be things that are really helpful for you as Jupiter ties into both the 3rd and the 6th. And I predict for you guys that either a job or a health routine can boost productivity. Maybe you join a new gym. Maybe, you get a standing desk, with a walking pad. Maybe you're walking to work. Maybe you're biking to work. I don't know what it is, but there's going to be something here that's going to boost productivity. Just watch for miscommunications that can arise. Try to be understanding and practice empathy and communication with other people with that square. And I do think that a belief will definitely shift, and that'll spark, something about a change to your routine. So watch for that. Watch for the scatteredness that can kind of happen here too, with just like overloading your schedule. Good luck, Capricorn. We've got Aquarius and Aquarius rising. You guys are going to experience Jupiter in Gemini in your natal 5th house, square the North Node in Pisces in the 2nd, and the South Node in Virgo in the 8th. Now, pretty financial for you is it squaring nodes in the money houses. But if you happen to be 20 to 29 degrees of Aquarius, Sun, Moon, or rising, it'll be trining your placements. So actually, you can navigate this, I think, a little bit better than some of the other signs. Obviously, the 5th house is a great house. This is about creativity. It's about playtime. It's about falling in love. Children. It can also be about self-expression, joy, taking chances, and risks. So Jupiter in the 5th house has probably taught you more fun, more socializing, more hobbies, more experiences, more partying, and really enjoying feeling like childlike and having a good time. And whether that's with your children or just in your hobbies or with your romantic endeavors, it's really been showing you that this is something that's worth investing in this year. Now, when it squares the North Node in Pisces, it's definitely bringing up financial matters, what you have, what you can and cannot spend. And it's squaring the South Node, which is going to be about transformation, joint finances, debt, loans, things like that. So really it's about, I think, investing in your talent. That's really what I think this is about. Expanding creative expression. I think that's a big one, even if you're doing it in a way that's like a little bit more, cautious with what you're spending. So maybe you're more careful with how much money you're spending on entertainment or going to the bars or, having fun with your kids or things like that. Like you're learning to have fun without breaking the bank, I think has been a big theme with the squares to Saturn, which is your traditional ruler. I also feel like this is, for many of you guys, about pursuing creative or romantic passions with focus, maybe releasing control when it comes to intimacy and being in the moment, setting soulful financial goals, and really trusting emotional bonds. Now, for many of you guys, because Jupiter is tied to the 11th house with socializing, friends, and partying, it can mean that you're just like, I want to have fun. It can also mean that there is some new financial goal that you have kind of come to terms with and you're willing to take risks, or you're investing in something that you believe in. Jupiter in the 5th house, especially in aspect to your 1st house, can indicate that, there is some good news coming from a child. So it could be, older children that you have. It could be them traveling. It could be good news in relation to their education in general. But also this can be a pregnancy transit for some of you guys. And as you know, Uranus is going to be coming into your 5th house pretty soon. So for some of you guys, it's taking a chance in starting a family. For others, it can mean that there is some new passion project that's emerging that you're wanting to kind of invest some time or energy into. So I predict for you guys that there's going to be a creative or a romantic spark that's going to ignite. You're going to see this. Just be mindful of financial decisions, have focus, and be a little bit more conservative with your spending. Intimacy will definitely deepen if you're willing to live in the moment and be vulnerable. Good luck. And we've got Pisces and Pisces rising. This is definitely very personal for you, Pisces, as Jupiter is your traditional ruler, and it is squaring the North Node and Saturn in your sign. So Jupiter is moving through the 4th house. You are Jupiter in many ways. So this can be talking about reflecting on the past, your home, your family. Just had a new moon here also. So it might be saying you have to go back home, or you're moving, or your home or your family is expanding, and this can be good. But this could also be a turning point as it's coming into a square with the North Node and Saturn in your signs. You're seeing a little bit of like I think like a split path, like a fork in the road, honestly. Home is the fourth house, and as is family. And the North Node and Saturn in the first house is self, your goals, your boundaries, what you need. Versus the South Node in Virgo in your seventh house, where you're releasing old, outdated ways of doing relationships or partnerships. So Jupiter square the North and South Node is basically saying that you're expanding your emotional roots, right? And you're doing this maybe through going back home, visiting family or a parent. Maybe you're saying, hey, it's time for me to move to another city or another country, get out of my comfort zone. It could also mean that there are expansions happening at home, whether you like it or not, because it's squaring Saturn. And I'm wondering, what is it? What is it that's changing? You know, really what you're supposed to be doing is maybe releasing critical partnership dynamics, maybe taking time to travel, be on your own. It can also mean that you're rethinking what home or family looks like. I think the focus here is really to create a nurturing home. And it can be a home away from home in Gemini. It can mean that it's a home that's a second home or a family home. Getting away and having some time to kind of reflect. Prioritizing self-compassion and also embracing your intuitive kind of abilities with the North Node in your first house. If you know it's time to move, if you know it's time to take a break, if it's time to sell the house, right? These kinds of things can definitely come up. And I think that this is about really encouraging you to communicate more so openly with partners about what you need on the home front. Now, I predict for you guys that family or home changes will bring growth, right? And you might be facing a little bit of self-doubt with some of the squares to Saturn in the North Node in your first house. Is this a good idea? Should I be moving here? Should I be leaving this person? Should I be, packing up and going to this new location? Should I be renovating my kitchen? But I think that it's going to be good for you. I think that you're going to be able to see that through patience and determination, that you're going to see some of the growth and the developments that you want. I mean, Jupiter's been landlocked in a square with Saturn in your sign really since last summer. So you have been holding off moving, changing, traveling, going back home. There's been something that you've been doing, or you've been preparing your home for something. Well, Jupiter's going into your fifth house over the summer. So a lot of Pisces and Pisces risings are going to go, well, I've been preparing my home because, we're going to have a kid, or I've been searching for the right place to move. And then you move and then you meet a romantic partner. There's going to be some really cool, interesting things that are going to start happening with these Jupiter transits. So there is a method to the madness. Now you have to figure out, do you want to stay in the past or do you want to move into the future, as the fourth house is dealing with the past? So watch out for some of those traps where you can kind of find that, self-doubt can surface. And there is some partnership changes in the midst of this, but I feel like that they will evolve through empathy, despite the fact that maybe you're not kind of feeling like you want to come home yet or you want to be settled yet. Relationship stuff can get sorted out later in the fall as we're coming into the eclipses. So for all I know right now, you guys might feel like kind of roaming, So you'll have to let me know what's kind of going on with that Jupiter square and what you're either dealing with privately or on the home front. Good luck. All right, guys. Well, that's all I have for you on Jupiter square the nodes. I hope it was insightful, give you a little bit of food for thought, maybe make you understand why we all kind of feel like we're just going to pop this week and next week, but all with good reason. Please don't forget to give me a comment below, share and subscribe to the channel. It helps the channel grow. Enjoy these growing pains this week. I will be going through it with you. I mean, do not be surprised if I'm MIA for a couple of days and I'm at an airport, because I'm feeling it in my ninth house. But let me know how you guys are feeling throughout this period, what growing pains are happening, what positive manifestations can we find that can kind of come through this transit. And boy, oh boy, this is going to be a really colorful news cycle for the next 2 weeks in particular. So leave me feedback. I'll be checking in with you guys and how this kind of materializes through my weeklies. Join me here tomorrow. Also, I'm going to be here live doing tarot readings at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. That's 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. I'll post a link tomorrow morning. So if you guys have questions, I'm happy to give you some insight. Great transits for tarot reading, by the way, because Jupiter is all about what you do with the hands. So maybe there is going to be lots of information that comes through the cards. We'll see. More information about me, my courses, and booking a one-on-one reading, click the links below. Head over to beyondtheveiltarot.com. Check that out and sign up for my newsletter while you are there. Otherwise, I will catch you guys all back here tomorrow, and I hope you enjoy these growing pains. See you soon.